Good day, YouTubers, and thank you for tuning in to today's voting video on YouTube. Remember I did a video which actually talks about the weight loss industry that I did back in 2022. Strangely enough, on my YouTube channel, I often tend to take a look at toys and things, but this time I'm going to be doing something which is straightforward, as I said earlier before, very much a sequel to what I did back then in 2025, and that is to talk about my weight. So has my weight came down or gone up? Very simple answer is my weight has shot up straightforward very fast. And as crazy as it sounds, hey, why has it been, it's been so crazy so far. And I'm not even joking because, hey, it seems like, who knows, I must have gone right up towards the local KFC and just ordered some big chicken bargain buckets for like 10 pieces and whatnot. Well, I didn't eat any 10 pieces, but I literally just ate pieces less than 10. Because it was a 10-piece bargain bucket, but then, it's straightforward, like less than 10 pieces of a bargain bucket, because I was with my dad in the car. I think I sometimes sort of order that every Saturday, along with Chinese takeaways and blah blah, but noticing that my weight is, it has sort of gained a lot. In fact, it has shot up so fast, as I said earlier on before. But then, hey, wait till you see the scary part, because, hey, that's gonna straightforward rock your brains so wildly. So much so that my weight has been gaining for quite some time now. And for me, that is actually very scary to hear about this, because I think back then, when I was a kid back then, or a teenager, I might have weighed about, let's just say 75, maybe 80 kilograms. But wait till you see about how much I weigh when I'm going to do something very relatively cringy at the time as I'm making this video. And actually, as a bit of a secret, I'm actually not one of the laziest, well actually, not one of the only few people who is considered to be fairly lazy, or not one of the few fairly lazy YouTubers on the planet. And I just sort of think back to myself, hey, well, it's a bit hard to tell because, hey, back then, when I was straightforward a kid back then, I couldn't, I was actually sort of thinking, there'll be other people saying to me, hey, do you exercise? No, I can't stand exercise. I'm actually one of the few people who is quite, lazy on earth. Although I have actually straightforward found some very good news and very good room provisions that I've done so far throughout my life on YouTube. Well, not just YouTube, but my life before YouTube. Okay, let's go ahead and do it. Okay, as I'm just walking out of my usual room, strangely enough, this one's actually going to be somehow totally different, because I don't usually come here to this room to straightforward make videos on YouTube. But I just thought, hey, why not try and show something that's very much, somehow very edgy. And I sort of think back to myself, I really want to go ahead and talk a bit of a very weird childhood story. And oh man, I initially thought, wow, how the heck am I just going to pull off something very nostalgic, while at the same time I'm being a bit edgy. Normally I don't often tend to film content that's very relatively edgy. I'll be just, gone in a sec, hey? But you know what? I'm going to do it right now because, hey, is this going to be a yay or a nay? Who knows? It's like, am I just sort of thinking, is this thing on? Okay, here we go. So, right, get ready for something very edgy because I'm going to show you how much weight have I just lost. Because I'm going to straightforward take this off. Don't worry about me, but then, hey, everything is all good in the hood because, what is going on with my tablet today? It's not going to do the job. It's crazy, isn't it? Right, I'm going to straightforward set up right here and do something that's very relatively crazy. Yeah, my tablet does not want to listen to me. But hey, here we go. Don't worry, I've actually got my nipples covered. Well, thank goodness I've got my nipples covered already now. Because if you show nipples on YouTube, you'll be flagged. Right, so here is the weight I've got today. How the hell am I just showing nipples like that? Well, look how big I am now. Okay, you can just see, well, I think back then, when I just sort of wore, I think at that time when I was this overweight, I think back then, I sort of think back to myself. In fact, I haven't got any more footage of me in that sort of style. Probably because, well, I'm so lazy, as I said before. But hey, you know, one of the strangest things I had so far was that I think when I was about 75 kilograms, and you know what's funny? In relationship to my diet, I sort of think back to myself, what was I eating back then? And I'm sort of thinking, I'm sort of scratching to my head, to myself, like, how the heck, what was I sort of eating back then? So, how the heck was I just doing back then? So, I'll tell you a bit of a story, man. So, you know, I think back then, as a kid, I was actually quite relatively skinny. So, at that point, as I'm making this video here, I was actually at my local primary school. Well, I think at that time I was about 5, 6 years old. I was actually relatively skinny. Same when I was actually just moving on to another primary school. And then I was also in secondary school. But then little did I know of what trouble I caused. And it wasn't because I haven't done anything rude or horrible at school. That wasn't just that. It was mainly because there was one peculiar thing that was right over. Oh man, I was nearly going to get tired. But hey, you know what? The fun is never over in this video making and blah blah. So yes, when I was actually at primary school, I would have actually ate quite a lot of food. But then it wasn't just the start. So, and of course, yes, as I'm talking about, yeah, I'll get into that part later where I talk about what food I eat today and whatnot. But hey, so I think at that time, I think usually before going back to school, I would usually tend to have like frankfurters with hot water, of course. Or is it like a soup filled with frankfurters? I can't really remember. It had like a very sweetening sort of taste. I don't know how much sugar. And strangely enough, it was something else. Well, I think back then, when I was a kid, I actually hated cereals back then because they were very odd. In fact, I was actually very nauseous towards cereals because of milk, and I actually sort of threw up and spilled out. I actually got very, very sick when I ate cereals because I wasn't very fond with cereals back then. But then I just straightforward moved on towards toast, and it was actually okay-ish. But then, as I moved into frankfurters, it made me relatively happy. But little do I know, as I said before, of what trouble it would cause right down towards my belly. So, what's going on? So, why am I talking about the subject of food, even though I'm just showing my nipples being covered, okay? So, the reason why I'm putting up this video is because there's quite a few reasons. First is to get off my chest. 2, also talk about the story and the experience of what I've got. And 3, this also helps to share an experience to other people who has never ever seen me this so overweight. So much so, this seems so edgy, but works really well for my YouTube channel, even though I tend to talk about toys, in that case, other stuff as well. So, well, here's my 5 cents. Okay, so the 5 cents I've got from now is that, for what I remember, my belly was relatively large. And the reason why it was so relatively large was because, well, I ate so much food, especially not just the breakfast that I was eating, but also in the way that my mum and dad prepared for me. Basically the lunch that I had. And luckily enough, I was one of the few people I didn't order any food from the canteen. I had packed lunch instead. So all I had was, I think I had jam sandwich. I had a bag of jam sandwich, just basically sliced in half. I had 2. Then I also had, I can't really remember. I think I had Capri Sun. And then the next thing that also came, I had an apple, of course, which made it nice and healthy. But then there was one other thing that was kind of a bit of a sin, and that was me eating Walker's potato chips, or crisps, as you like to call it in the UK. But yeah, it's a bit strange. It's a bit funny somehow, because I do know that, well, let's not get into term wars, but then, hey, you know, I did eat I sort of ate quite a lot of food back then during my younger days back then, and I think that was a bit of a sin somehow, for that matter. And then one other thing I also sort of remembered was that after coming back from school, well, there was one other thing. Okay, so I think when I went actually straightforward back towards my house, which was of course not this one, but the one in Northfield, which was of course the parents' house that I actually straightforward resided on, to tell you a bit of a story about my weight. Strangely enough, my weight was also straightforward gaining, and I think the time was, I can't really remember, but every time, like every Monday to Friday, I would literally come back into school, wash my hands, and then get myself ready for lunch by running downstairs. So I was actually quite energetic, but I was also quite dangerous to the whole house, because I would have actually ran, possibly damaging the whole house, or even damaging myself as well too, or damaging other people of my whole family, including my siblings and possibly my mum and dad. I would have been a complete troublemaker back then, but and hey, you know, those are the good old days, and the world's different place is today. But anyways, one other thing I also want to talk about is the food that I just ate back then when I was a kid. And I think back then to myself, what was I eating back then when I was having lunch? At the time I was having lunch, around at the time when I was actually at my parents' house, I would have straightforward, you know, basically ate. It would have been like porridge, which was obviously the healthiest choice, but I wasn't into that sort of viscosity type stuff. It was all gooey and it was all quite, you know, slimy to me at first, in my opinion. But then I just sort of suddenly got over with it. Then noodles was alright because it was actually quite the right amount of viscosity. It was kind of similar to water. The soup was well done. And then you've got the cool stuff. You've got your chips or fries. You've got your chicken nuggets. You've got your... What else did I have? Waffles, fish fingers. But I didn't strive on burgers, really. So I just straightforward thrived. Just that. And sometimes pizza, that's number 5. So how the heck would I even know if I was straightforward, you know, delving into a wide range of basically fast food? You know, sometimes if I really remember, I'll just end up going to like KFC or McDonald's or Burger King. Nowadays, I just straightforward eat KFC, which is like the only thing I can straightforward enjoy eating food, or fast food in that case. But then, hey, you know, after eating KFC, watch that. Oh my goodness me. Look how much damage my belly has seen. Yeah, it's pretty much has seen far much better days than what I had when I was a skinny, scrawny little child. But then, hey, you know, that's the past. And even though I'm still straightforward, still living in modern times, I feel like it's a combo between the past and the future. That's what I can really describe. But, yeah, honestly, I did order... Well, my dad sort of ordered, like, I think every time when I go outside with my dad, sometimes I'll just be ordering a Chinese takeaway most of the time, but then I'll also be ordering, like, KFC, which, in a sense, I'll just bulk up. Who knows? I'll be eating a Cadbury's cream egg if I was being that bloody oblivious. I was gonna go to that sort of thing and then just bulk up because of chocolate, because it's junk food, obviously. But, you know, there are so many things I just straightforward would love to say, but at the same time would never ever want to say, because it could probably upset the whole apple cart of my own fan base. Well, I'm about to, because what I'm going to show you at the very end of the video is going to be very edgy, especially for those who are hating my YouTube channel. So much so they're going to hate me just because I'm cringe or stupid or ugly or whatever. Okay, so who knows? That could be a great payback. But anyways, strange enough, going back into this whole story about my weight loss. So, well, anti-weight loss, obviously, because I didn't lose any weight. So, to put this into a backstory, well, I wasn't eating the right foods when I was a kid. But then, straightforward, I think, apart from breakfast, packed meals for school, and then lunch, and I think sometimes... at school, sometimes after like the first lesson at primary school, I would sometimes crave on like digestive biscuits or rich tea biscuits, but I personally prefer digestives because they were actually a lot much more beautiful in terms of taste. And let's go to dinner. So dinner is straightforward, like very, very simple. Normally I tend to have a lot of like chicken with soup and rice cooked by my mum and dad, or any other meat in general with vegetables or fish or any other whatnot. And also sometimes potatoes. But then, hey, you know, potatoes are straightforward, very much the average. And as I'm going to say that now, average is pretty much a very dangerous word. I'll get into that one later on. But yes, so we do sometimes serve roast potatoes, as I sort of remember somehow in my whole family and whatnot. Okay, going back to this whole the word relating to the word average. So normally whenever I think about the word average, it's actually quite a relatively dangerous term for how much I really relate into my body, because we've all got like different metabolisms, we're all different styles, and we've all got like different workloads and different body loads and that sort of stuff. And during the day, strange enough, it seems like I've sort of changed. Well, yes, I sort of have, but I'm sort of retaining some of these little bits of mine that weren't really straightforward, going to be leaving sooner than later. Like, I sort of think back to myself, what was I doing back then? Well, the thing I was doing back then was something else. You phone up, I lost sweat. Oh man, I feel tired. Yeah, I think the other thing is that when I get so overweight, I get actually tired even more so. And there's also another thing that also sort of picks up and bulks up a lot of weight from mine. If I just stand back once more. So, well, here's my 5 cents. I can literally think back to myself, why is my body straightforward like that? Okay, so, well, the reason why my body has been straightforward like that is because, well, I haven't gained so much exercise when I was a child. So I honestly think back to myself, what was I doing? I kind of think back to myself that I was straightforward, like, you know, unlike people who were straightforward, active in the sunshine, I sort of grew up in a very Malaysian style where I got used to it, and that's all I can really think of back to myself somehow. Hey, I'll get into that later on, because hey, talking about my weight when I was in Malaysia last year, and also during my trips in Malaysia, are also quite a bit of a misconception, because hey, I often eat less food during the summer. Well, that's actually not the case, because our summers are fairly right now it's spring at the moment, but we had a very weird drier than average spring, which feels more like summer somehow. In fact, who knows, there could be a drought somehow. Water, water, water. Anyways, I'll get into water later on. So, there comes a bit of context. So, what was I thinking back then? So, oh, pardon me. Okay, so, it's going to be a very complex and very long video, just to warn you guys. I'm sorry to say this, but I have to remind you guys that you're watching a very rough and ready, but very complex video on YouTube, because, hey, you're basically looking at me talking about my weight and why have I been gaining so much weight of late. Well, obviously, one of the biggest misconceptions is all to do with, well, basically, I seem to be a bit of a nemesis about people or other people wearing, you know, cardigans, jackets, blazers, jumpers, or sweaters, or cardigans. And I mean, just because they're wearing long sleeve clothing at this sort of weather, or when it's like, you know, of course they'll be wearing it more when it's freezing cold, but just because if it's like a nice sunny day, doesn't exactly mean it's going to be cold. They're just straightforward wearing it in the morning to keep themselves warm. That's what I'm thinking of. Or even in this case, the weather is rubbish in the UK. That's what I'm sort of thinking. That's why I sort of like wear long sleeves. And I mean, that's kind of like a bit of a mimicry. Why the hell did I just farted? As a bit of a mimicry type thing, just to straightforward like copy other people wearing clothing like that. Well, that's not always the case somehow. I'm sorry to say this, but then hey, that's straightforward a bit of a misconception. But anyways, so during my quest of losing my weight, and I sort of think back to myself, what was I doing? So I think back then as a child, I would have been playing lots of computer games or video games, or even looking at the computer as a whole. I don't really seem to exercise that much because, well, it actually turns out that because I was straightforward relatively heavier, I was quite heavy, strangely enough somehow, and because my parents' house had a very delicate and very, well, let's just say low quality sort of wooden floor, well, it sort of made sense that my parents' house was relatively vulnerable at the fact that they were straightforward, very relatively overprotective of their home, that if I would have stomped my feet, if I was getting really mad or angry or anything, it wasn't, I sort of get that point, like, I was, it's a thing, like, the flooring wasn't really that good. That's why I didn't do that much in the way of exercising when I was actually at my parents' house. And the other thing was I was actually more relying on, like, playing computer games for the sake of my own entertainment and that sort of stuff, I think. So I would have been quite fairly sedentary, so that meant I didn't actually have the chance to go outside to my backyard garden, unlike all the things I've done so far from, like, today. Here's me in my own modern world somehow. So it seems so different, but then hey, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and just talk about some of the things they might have never ever known. Of course, I still eat a lot of KFCs, but hey, you know, how much weight do I have to really lose? Like how many kilograms or calories or kilojoules do I have to lose and stuff like that, hey? Who knows? There'll be a lot of like other people saying to me, oh, you gotta go ahead and straightforward kill yourself and die, or queue over and die and just straightforward never exist again just to curb my weight. Well, that would be very stupid. Well, actually, the one better thing is, who knows? Who knows, I could just do a bunch of exercising. But I got a funny feeling, once you start to do a lot of exercising, I think the next thing you're going to need is a lot of calories. And I think that's one of the weirdest things I've just heard about. That's a bit strange about the weight loss industry. Well, what can I really say about the weight loss industry is that it can't make money unless if you are, you know, basically sick and fat. And that's one of the biggest top life lessons for you guys, just to straightforward like hear about it. It's true. It's very much true by the looks of it, hey? So I'm just going to put my camera. There is a box of some sort of anime pop figure, which I'm not going to show on YouTube because, hey, who knows about that? Right, obviously, so, well, here's something I've noticed in the way I've changed. Like, the way I eat these days is so different. Like, back then as a child, I think I would have ate quite a bit of, like, just apple and just the regular soup meals that my dad cooks and whatnot. It really depends on what type of soup they're just straightforward made. Usually it's Asian food, mainly in the form of East Asian type food like Chinese or Malaysian, I think. Sometimes Japanese or Korean, I think. But, you know, that's straightforward what I'd normally tend to eat on my day-to-day basis, wall-to-wall basis, and how I schedule things and blah, blah. But, you know, I would actually sort of think back to myself, how much was I eating back then? Like, if I ever think back, going back to Malaysia, well, what was I doing back then? Well, although the weather was relatively hot, well, I drank a lot of water, especially when I was back here in the UK, doing a lot of, like, stuff. Like, when it was, like, really hot, I would have drank so much water. I sort of struggle on the heat, but I sort of love it, of course, hey? And the other problem is that when you drink far too much water, you actually add so much weight. And then the other thing is that when you sort of exercise, I think when you're sort of overweight, you don't actually seem to feel like you're enjoying it. You actually seem to straightforward pant even more and actually exhaust more and actually feel a lot more pain more so, because all that water you sort of accumulate into your body sort of adds in that amount of weight. It sort of strains your movement. And I think when you already like lose a bit of weight, you actually start to feel a lot much more confident and also a lot much more happier, but also a lot much more determined and also a bit much more energetic to basically like move around and stuff. Well, for me, it seems like the opposite, and I've just farted right on screen. How stupid was that? And I think, speaking of stupid, who knows, by the end of this video, of this long goddamn story, who knows of what's going to come is going to be completely and utterly crazy. I think going back to how I eat food nowadays, it's seemingly a bit different because I've just moved house. Basically, I'm missing the soups that my mum and dad have cooked, but who knows, by later on, the next tonight, I'm actually making this video around Tuesday morning. It's so early, and it's already still dark. God damn it. Who knows, the neighbours will call the cops for basically me making a whole bunch of noise, just going blah, blah, blah. But then, hey, you know, I'm just telling you a bit of a philosophical story on how my weight loss thing must have came out to be some sort of weird existential crisis. According to the facts, I didn't straightforward lose weight. In fact, I gained so much weight. So much so, well, the biggest misconception is that I seem to gain so much weight during winter. And I mean, that's true, but to compromise that, it also happens during the spring, the summer, and in the autumn, because it's obviously, well, yeah, you know what? I often see a lot of people in the UK wearing long sleeve clothing, whether it's a jacket, a blazer, a jumper, a sweater, or a cardigan, or a fleece. And I mean, whenever I see that, I just get a bit irritated by that. But I just straightforward take no notice on whoever is wearing that. I just straightforward take no notice on that and just walk away, and just, that's it. So in that case, I just straightforward ignore, but then just think of them all by myself, but I don't think about them that longer. Because the only thing that helps me is to really eat so much food. Like, recently, yesterday afternoon, I just straight forward served like 5-6 cupfuls of rice. That maybe like a whole jar of rice. Maybe about the size of this minion ball. Who knows of how big this is. Maybe, who knows, maybe that portion would equivalent to just how big I am. As stupid as this sounds. Well, I don't know how much I can really hope that maybe in the future I can just straightforward think about exercising and losing my own weight. But then at the same time, I'm still very lazy. Like, I'm still straightforward, a bit naive and a bit stupid and a bit dim-witted and a bit klutzy and dumb. Like, how much weight have I been losing? How much I've been straightforward exercising? Well, yes, I have been recently doing some very good exercising so far in terms of dancing. Like, every morning, or even in this case, like nighttime, or even at the evening, I often straightforward like dance to like, 2010s music or 80s music or 2000s music. They're more nostalgic. Same with the 70s. Not sure about the 90s. I actually said the 90s are also quite good as well. But I know, dancing is relatively good. Yeah. I also do a lot of like outdoor trips and stuff too. That sort of actually keeps me like motivated to lose all of my weight. Well, not all of it, but lose some of my weight, obviously. But the bulk of it, all of it, very impossible. But who knows? It could be a thing. Maybe I need to try and think of some ways to try and lose some weight. Like, for example, if I think about that one person in Australia who decides to go ahead and buy like McDonald's salad in Australia and then just straightforward lose the weight by going to McDonald's by ordering their salads instead of their bloody fast food type stuff, if you ask me. Yeah, you know what? That's a bit edgy, but then hey, very clever. But hey, I sort of think back to myself, hey, if I would have done that, maybe I could have just straightforward done that to just straightforward lose some weight instead of just going to the hospital of just doing the most basic thing, exercising and that sort of stuff. Bit weird. I often think back to myself, wow, what else am I going to be really talking about my weight? Strange enough, there is one other thing I've actually totally forgotten. As a kid or as a teenager, I think nowadays because I'm more... Okay, here's what you're watching now. You're basically watching me talking about my weight loss, and what I'm using is a tablet. And that's the sort of device that you are watching, or basically a computer, or a mobile phone, or anything with a screen like that on YouTube, or any other video system and blah blah. You basically see me of how much weight have I been losing. Well, unfortunately, as I said before, I haven't been losing weight. I've just gained so much weight as I've already done. What is very, very strange is that I always keep on seeming to, bring up so many groceries, so much so that the amount of groceries I seem to bring up is fairly excessive. And there's even more things apart from the fact, well, in my normal routine, I just bring big cargo loads of food, like 2 to 3 carrots, or 3 to 4 potatoes, or 2 onions, or maybe, who knows, 3 chili peppers. How much weight am I going to lose after eating that? Or even after like 6 cupfuls of rice, or even 8? That's bloody crazy if you ask me. I'll be just straightforward like a balloon, like this ball here. I'll be as fat as this ball here, but twice the size. Maybe as umpteen thousand times twice the size as that ball. That would be bloody life-threatening. That would be traumatizing, actually, as sad as it sounds. But who knows? Strange enough, yeah, you know what, it's a bit edgy. But then, hey, let me tell you another part about my weight loss story. And that is, of course, as you may have noticed, you might have actually seen my nipples earlier on at the end of the video, but they were straightforward covered because YouTube really hates nipples, because if I show them, they'll be flagged. So, as I'm going around in this whole nipple debacle, so there was at one time when I went to Malaysia, and I went to this giant shopping mall, I think it was, not far away from where my holiday house was, and then all of a sudden that my mum and I were straightforward at a Japanese retailer for clothes called Uniqlo. I know there's a big one coming up in Birmingham around autumn and winter of 2025, but the one I'm on about is the one in Malaysia. Strangely enough, I think it was called the City Mall, but then I saw quite, you know what really fascinated me? Well, I did buy a jumper that was much thicker than that. It had like darker green sleeves and a different hue of green that was quite thick. But one of the clothes that really intrigued me was a very translucent yellow and a green t-shirt, which would have been perfect for t-shirt printing. But one thing I've noticed, it actually exposed my nipples. So what really meant was that my mum got really embarrassed. It was such a really cringy experience. So much so, I also felt that cringy experience too, although I was actually feeling rather happy whenever I saw that t-shirt, that specific type of t-shirt. I was like, what can I do about that? Well, nah, it's just one of them things. Who knows about buying t-shirts? And who knows, I didn't explode and just start, I didn't threaten my mum back. That was just straightforward about it. We just straightforward didn't touch it because, that t-shirt would have actually displayed my nipples and then people would just laugh at me. Just for the sake of being a complete laughing stock. Obviously I didn't buy it, but then hey, that was just it. I didn't buy it for the sake of my nipples being covered. Or even seen. Obviously I don't want them to be seen because that would be stupid and embarrassing. And that was it. Obviously, who knows? I wonder how long my weight. Who knows? Maybe if I would have done so much like regular exercising, despite the amount of heat and humidity, I would have combated every Malaysian trip or every hot day outside. And even if I was going to straightforward drink so much water, I would have straightforward maybe drink just a little. Let's just say a 50-50 of it. Be it not too much, not too little, just the right amount of water. Obviously, that will equivalent to about 8 glasses of water. If I'm being totally oblivious here. So, well, here's my 5 cents. I would rather straightforward drink as much water as possible, but not too much. Because the more water I drink, the more water I accumulate, it will just straightforward bulk up my weight. And will just straightforward, be a bit of a bad thing because, my weight will just straightforward pick up. And the more big and fat I actually become, the more likely I'm just going to straightforward sleep and yawn. Or even in this case, just sleep and doze and even napping in a sense. Oh, man, obviously that sort of thing does sort of happen not just in winter when the days are straightforward cold and long and dark, but then hey, during summertime that also seems to happen as well, depending on the weather source. But anyways, I think that's straightforward about it in this sort of weight loss video on YouTube. Who knows? I could just straightforward talk about that even more. Like, for example, I was just sort of thinking of buying an XL t-shirt. But my size here for this long sleeve, I think it's L size. L size is okay. But XL, a little bit too big. But then, hey, sort of thinking about getting an XL because I'm straightforward somehow gaining some weight. But then, hey, that's a bit of a thing. Who knows of how much weight I'll be gaining will straightforward determine and depend on how much food that my parents, my support workers, and also my relatives are serving to me. And okay, who knows, I could just bulk up. And yeah, I think that's going to be about it for today's stupid video. Maybe it's time for me to just straightforward end this bloody video with a bit of a very weird note. So if you really enjoyed in this very cringy video about me talking about my weight loss story and how that failed, well, of course, if you remember back in 2019, well, I wasn't really aware of just how many people were wearing jumpers, coats, blazers, cardigans, fleeces, and that sort of stuff. It was pretty cold, and yeah, I got quite awkward with that. And then, of course, COVID built my weight. Of course, I didn't move at all during COVID. That was one thing I sort of remember. So, anyways, I'm gonna leave this video right now before I get into a whole bunch of trouble talking about my nipples and also the weight loss. Who knows, I can just talk about the COVID thing because, hey, during lockdown, it was really hard to get outside and didn't have that much exercise. That's all I can really remember. But then, hey, that's about it. That's over from that point somehow. That is straightforward about it. So, anyways, that's about my 5 cents about my weight loss thing. So, if you really enjoyed it, please give this video a like, subscribe for more for that videos in the future. And as always, thanks so much for watching and bye for now. I'm actually just sort of thinking, I'm going to do something that's really stupid. Really stupid. Okay. Please don't show it. Okay, at least I'm not gonna have another nipple being flagged. How stupid was I thinking? Oh my goodness me. You wanna see the other one, don't you? You sad people. You sick puppies. Okay, doing it as fast as a trick here. Oh! How foolish.